So I've already explained to you some principles of perspective in the two previous videos, explaining 1, 2 and 3 point perspective. This is one of the paintings I used to explain it. 2 point perspective, well, possibly even a tiny bit of 3 point perspective, is the tower. It's quite close to us. And if we were to include the other side of this tower, there would be a little bit of a lean in it, because it's in the middle of our vision. This vertical seems vertical. But I've got another photograph I'm going to show you here. In fact, I've got a couple of photographs I'm going to use to help me do a slightly different composition on this. So I've got a photograph here including the figures, as I commented on before, with their relative height and position to the church. And it includes a little bit of the church to the right of the tree, which I haven't included in my sketch here. And then another photograph here which includes a bit more of the church to the right of the tree. And because we're now looking with the tree nearer to the centre, the tower is slightly leaning. If you actually put a pencil on the tower, you can see that's a vertical and it's slightly leaning, and the outside of the tower is leaning a tiny bit more. So actually this gives us a chance to put the principles of 3 point perspective into a painting. So let's get cracking. And because I've got this tree here, the problem with this tree is that obviously it's very central. I'm going to slightly move it to the right, and I'm going to include a little bit more of the left hand side, and in fact in the other photograph you see where the trees continue. So I'm just going to slightly reduce it, and I'm also going to try and do this in a sort of quick sketchy style rather than go into any more detail than I did in my earlier sketch. So on that basis, let's just get where the eye level is, which is up to the porch here. It's about a third of the way up, so let's put the eye level in the same place, about a third of the way up my picture. So that's my eye level. It's not the ground, it's the eye level up here. So it's almost where the wall is. The top of this wall comes up a little bit higher than eye level. So there's a wall that comes in here. And on that basis, let's just break this composition down into simple shapes. So the tree over here, this yew tree, I'm going to move slightly off to the right, so that the edge of it is more central, if you like, here. So, or even just here a bit more central, so slightly off to the right. I'm just going to do a general shape of it in pencil. And I'm working on 140 pound watercolour paper on a block. So that's the tree. Then we've got a little bit of church to the right of it, and we've got the church to the left of it. So I'm going slightly bigger, but let's just work out where to put this tower in, because we've got the eye level here, and we're going to go just down below the eye level here. So this is where the edge of the tower comes. Now, the nearest vertical of the tower is what I've always said you should try to draw first. We can't see the whole of that, but nonetheless I'm going to imagine the whole of it, and then I'm going to come forward from it. So let's just get the tower and pin the church to the tower. So let's put a slightly sloping vertical over here, slightly tilting to the right. I'm going to move the tower up to about here, so that's what we've now got to scale everything to. So if we go to the height of the whole tower, we can work out that the whole of the church is 1 tower and a half wide. If we come up to here, let's just work out what else we've got. One. Okay, if we're going to include the whole length of the church, it's now 1, including the buttress there. 1, and it's 1 3/4. It's more like this point here comes to 1 and let's say 7/8. But anyway, it's just under 2. So if we work on the basis of 2, let's pin that back into place. So we've got 2 towers. Let's see if that works. So the tower conveniently is as high as my pencil, or the yellow part of the pencil. So 1 goes across, so hang on, that does include the top of the S, it does include the rubber. So 1, 2, just gets to the edge. So my answer to that is, because I'm coming too close to my right edge, like in the photograph, I'm going to try and bring it in slightly. So I'm going to just scale the tower down by a little bit. So now, let's see what we get here. We've got the tower is that high, 1, just over 3/4. So now we're going to go to that height on here. So I'm actually going up slightly, but all I have to do is compare it to the So I've made a mark here, so I've now got a proportion that will help me get everything in scale. So we can work to any scale we like, we don't have to copy this scale. Just very lightly I'm going to plan this all in. So the buttress comes here. Actually, we'll just double check that measurement. Buttress to the central line of the tower counts in 1, 2, 3.5 times. Let's see if I've got that right. I think I've got it a bit too fat. 3.25. I'm just going to bring that in a tiny bit because I brought that in a tiny bit. So now to that mark, I've got some 1, 2, 3. That's it. So that's my buttress to the tower. The edge of the actual tower comes here. So that's leaning in a bit. Let's just plot that roughly. And again, if you need to check, you can line your photograph up. Let's just show you to remind you. You line your photograph up with any lines you draw here. And let's just see. So we've got this line going at that angle. Yeah, I need to come a little bit more angle down here, just a tiny bit. And this line coming at that angle. So that tower line there. That's better. So I've actually got to tilt the top of the tower in by a tiny bit. This is where you need to do a few little careful measurements. Let's just do that. And again, I can gauge the width of the tower at the top to work this out. So there's a little bit more slope. So there we are. We've got a bit of a slope on there. And even the back of the tower is nearly vertical over here, and that's a similar width. We're pretty much 45 degrees to the tower, so that comes in here. Now we can just work off the top of the tower and come down at this angle, like so. Just gauge the angle. You can work off the top of the tower there. That's a fractionally steeper angle there. So the perspective starts to take place. Let's move it back into here so you can see more. We've got that caricature appearing there. Let's hide that. It's not relevant for now. So here we go. So we can work out the heights. We can work out the height of the buttress where it comes in. Over here. We can work out the angles through the corbels here, which is the bits of stone that project out from the side. We can work out the angle of the roof of the nave, and it's again in its height. And all these little measurements are worth checking. You can work out the slope of the roof of the nave coming down here. And of course, you've got the porch to come on in a minute. So now we lose that behind the tree, that shape. And again, we can measure the depth of the roof if required. And when you look back at this photograph, I'll put it back in position here. You'll see that when you look through the tree, that the ridge is not in line. It's because there are two heights, there are two separate roofs here. So don't be confused by that. This line is not going to continue past the tree. We start a new line in the tree that does the rest of it. So move that back again so we can see what we've got here. So again, this line where the gutter comes down lower than that line. And in fact, put your pencil on it, see where it goes to, and it's easier to gauge it. So we've got the basis of that, and in fact, let's go right to the end of the church. We're edge on pretty much to the gable effectively at the end of the church. And you've got a perspective coming down from where the tower comes to here, going the bottom wall of the church comes down lower. So now we've got a nice, I'll move it back so you can see, we've got the perspective here. Again, you could plot vanishing points on a large piece of paper, but I think if you can just check every angle as you go, you won't need to do that. So now you've got to put this porch on. The front edge of the porch does not quite line up with the tower, so we just got to go to the right of that, and now we can place the line here. So that's the front of the porch. We can work out the height of the porch relative to its width, and so on, so we get all the proportions right. And we've got a right hand wall there, left hand wall is coming over 2/3 to go across the tower to about to there. And let's forget the gable for the minute, let's just concentrate on the lower perspectives of front of the porch comes down at an angle here. There's actually slightly sloping in different levels in the ground here, which make the angles a little bit more difficult to read. But and now we've got the gable. Now, with the gable, one of the simple ways to work out where the centre of the gable is to visualise or draw a diagonal. So this is the end wall. If we put a diagonal through this wall and a diagonal the other way, that gives us a centre line where the arch is in the centre, but actually that line in the centre does not go to the middle of the gable because it overhangs. So that helps me, because when we get to the height of this gable, which is coming in higher than that, let's just work out again where that is relative to the tower. I think pretty much half the height of the tower is to the top of that gable. So let's just double check on our tower. Yeah. So that is correct to here. But the gable itself comes slightly to the left because it overhangs. And again, we can work out where this point is here by measuring across again. Most of the time, you don't have to measure everything meticulously. If you've got an eye for this, you can just sketch it in, and if it doesn't look perfect, okay, let's make some adjustments. So I'm just going by eye more here, and again, because of the overhang of this gable, it overhangs the end of this wall. It might be useful actually to rub out where the tower comes in, because we can't see the tower at that point. So let's just take that line away. And we've got a gutter on the other side which comes out, and actually comes out almost to the end of the edge of the tower itself. So we've got a line like that, and just checking that is just off the centre line of the tower. And this end of the gutter on that side of the porch comes a fraction lower than on this side, so we can get that right here. It's going to come out a little bit more. This point is not quite halfway through the tower, so I'm just making sure my apex of the gable is in line with everything else. If you get one little mark like this, or one point wrong, it can throw everything else out. And I always say that with the perspective, okay, we don't have to measure everything to the millimetre, but it's got to look right, and if only one line looks wrong, the whole drawing is wrong. So it's worth spending a bit of time to get the perspective pretty much right. And now let's go back and pop those lines back in. So that was the edge of the porch here. And we see inside to that porch as well. In a minute we can do all the other sort of extra detail and so on. And we've got this gnonon, actually. It's a sundial. So it's a gnonon in here. You can look that up, G-N-O-N-O-N. Good Scrabble word. I'm not going to draw that perfectly yet. I'm going to place it, because I'm going to also place the figures in. I've actually brought the tree slightly over because I want to see a bit of the edge of this tower. I'm going to have a bit of tree coming over here, but not to totally obscure it. So I'm taking a slight change in there. And of course the tree comes up closer to here, so again, I'm just repositioning my tree. I think when I put the tree in, I sort of visualised doing the church slightly further over. So let's just move the tree into the right place. And that gives us a chance to, that comes down lower. And there are some shapes in it that will soften this when you paint it. You don't have to do it quite so dark, quite so obtrusive, but I'm very much liking the idea of the church sort of in this little enclosed churchyard with the trees around it, so that, to me, the tree is good. So we've got the basic ingredients. We've got to put an arch window up here. Actually go a bit higher, just working out the height. And we've got to put an arch window the other side, which you don't quite see in here. It's up to you whether you want to hide it. So when you draw arches, you draw a rectangle in perspective. So you draw a rectangle, or you draw a window that looks like a window shape, so just a rectangle in perspective, like so. Then we work out where the arch starts to curve from, both sides, and then on the centre line that you've placed it, you can then arch has also got to be drawn, so there's a second line there which gives the depth. Same over here, and just to get them lined up, again, draw some perspective lines right through, and then you can make sure the height of the window on both sides is consistent. Actually, looking at this ridge, it comes down. I've got it a bit too high here. I need to bring it down. Interestingly, it's not in line. I've just looked again. There was me trying to get it in line. This window, or this louvered event, comes down lower, so that window was right. So again, draw the box in perspective, work out where the arch starts to curve, and here you've got to invent it a little bit, or I can look at other photographs to see if I can get that right, and if it doesn't look right, put the tree back in front of it. Cut battlements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 battlements. So we've got to divide this up into 6. So halfway is here, and then we've got 3 each side of that. So again, we can sort of work out 1. I'm sorry, I've got to bring that down a bit. Let me just adjust that. Let's draw another line for the bottom of each battlement, and now we can draw 1 here, 1 here, 1 here with a gap, and the gaps are nearly as wide as the battlements themselves. And then we do the same over here, 1, 2, 3. So you're drawing the gaps here. I'll just shade them so you can see which bits are gaps. Those are the gaps. And all of the tops of these battlements that go back will get angled back down following this right hand perspective. So that gives our 6 battlements approximately, and the same over here. So we've got the centre line which will give us a middle of the there, and so now we've got 1 here and 1 there, and we've got 1 there already, so 1, 2, 3. Just takes a little bit of planning, and if you get that wrong and have to redo it, it doesn't matter. And again, the edge of each of these battlements goes back. Little details like this can make a huge effect in the whole, it can look so effective in the whole drawing. Let's just tidy up what I've done with the arches. Let's just actually, I've got this buttress going up a bit too high. I've got the other features in it, only comes up a little bit, tiny bit higher than the top of that gable. And the next step in the buttress comes down here, so I just draw them a little bit clumsily to start with. So there we go. Put them back. I'm drawing, by the way, with an HB pencil, so that it doesn't intrude too much into the watercolour I'm going to put on top. And we've got an overhanging gable here with deep shadow, and the barge board is very ornate actually. You can even hint at that. It's got a little scroll design, carved design in it. But that's there. We've got the arch coming into the porch here, and actually the timber above the arch has got a curve to it, and the apex of the arch is just up above the bottom of the gable. And let's just go through the whole bit of this arch. So it goes from about here. It's getting a bit messy now. I'll tidy this up in a minute so you can see. So it goes here and up to here, and it starts curving about here. So I just make a point on each side, now I can draw the arch accurately. And on this left side of the arch we see the inside edge of the arch as well, so that comes in, and then we've got this deep bit of stonework in here. Let's tidy that up so you can see what I've got. So I'm hoping that by challenging you to a 3-point perspective to make something a little bit more challenging, that if you can win this particular, just putting a gravestone over here, if you can win this battle, it will give you the confidence to do all sorts of clever things with 3-point perspective. So let's just race ahead here doing the timbers. Well, I will count the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 timbers, and then there's not including the ones at the edge, so we can put one in the middle, and then we can put 2 into each of those gaps. That does that. And there's a little bit of a feature that comes down underneath the cross, which is put up here, and little things like that. Even the cross is in perspective, guys, so just tiny things like that. If you get it wrong, can throw everything else. So tidy up a bit here. Let's come down off the top. Put the basics in shape, in place. And shall I include the lawnmower? It's a good idea. Might be fun. We've got the path, which is even in perspective. And we've got the path that loops around here, so we'll just do a nice big loop there. And then we've got the plinth of this sundial. It comes down a little bit, I put it so it's there. And just draw a centre line when you've got something like this, like balusters and plinths. They just need to be balanced, so to draw a centre line, make sure you get them even on both sides. And very, very thin lips on the top of it. So, and even the base of this follows the perspective of the church, although the stone slab in the ground is, I think, an octagonal one, so that's a bit more complicated, but you could just hint at that without being too fastidious. So let's put in the rest of the composition. We've got a wall that comes off here, just say higher than our eye level. We start by seeing a tree over here. Let's look at our next photograph. That continues over, so we've got lots of tree there. We see the top of that, and then we see another tree reaching in, which softens the composition. So we see it here too. This second photograph, it doesn't come so far, so you can take your pick which you want to do. And I'll just hint at that. There's actually, same as I did in my sketch, I'll show you this again, there is an arch in this wall. And in fact, I see more in my sketch, to show you again, than I see in my photographs, because the photographs have made this very dark. So there's a doorway in this wall. I'm going to use that as a nice way to finish the composition over here. So the bottom of the wall comes in just above this buttress. Let's get the buttress coming down the right point. The bottom of the wall comes here. The top of the wall actually comes a tiny bit higher. And then we've got a doorway underneath this tree, so that gives a nice sort of rounded. Well, it just comes to a slight point. It's a soft curving arch in there, and that's in shade, and that will provide a nice little feature to the side of the composition. I'll come back to the figures in a second. What I'll do is I'll do the painting side of this as a second video. You do want to draw in a few big stones, and you might even hint at a few stones in the tower. So I'm just drawing a few lines following perspective all the way up. I'm not going to draw them all in, but you can. It's up to you how many you depict. If you look at my sketch, I only just drew a few lines. I didn't really pick them out because they're not that pronounced. Although I did pick out different colours in the stonework lower down. And again, I didn't pick out individual stones there or even in the wall. I just hinted at it. So if you want to do the same, that's fine. The buttress has more pronounced stones. So let's just come over to the other side. I'm just going to move my photograph so I can see what I'm doing here. And we've got another window, which is basically, let's pin this into place. Basically, put it up here. Like it. So we've got this window here, just make sure it's lined up in the right angle. We've also got, interestingly, a slight slope on this wall, again with a 3-point perspective. So let's move the base of this tree over a tiny bit. And maybe actually I'll use the tree just to hide part of this window. I'll decide in a minute. So the base of the window goes here, top of it goes here. Let's not worry about the sides of it too much. I'm just going to imagine that the side is straight to start with. Let's the overall proportions about right, so the inside of the window starts about here and here. You've got the central mullion, and now we've got two arches over here, so I'm just dividing it up like a sort of casement window, and then we can put the individual bits of window in, and they're quite narrow, so we've got to allow for the thickness of this mullion and then get the proportion right of each bit. It's a deep ledge, so that's fine there. The top bit goes here, and what we've actually got here is like a curve plus another bit. So when you do church windows, you sometimes have to break them down into simpler shapes initially. So I'm doing that on both windows here, and then we add a little pointy bit at the top of each one, and then if we follow the outside of those windows up to the big curve here, we've got to do a rose window. Again, if you find this too complex, just do the composition like my first painting without this part of it. So the rose window, let's start with a circle. And then basically we've got 4 circles, one overlapping. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's tidy that up a bit. Let's just rub it back. There's also a bit of tree getting in the way here. So let's now just draw the outside of those circles. So we've got half of a circle here. Let's call it a semicircle here, another semicircle. So I draw the 4 circles so you get the relationship, and then you go back and draw the outside semicircles, and you get your rose window. And then you can put bits of stonework inside, and there's a little tiny bit of window at the edge in each place here. So that looks quite complicated to start with, but when you break it down into component parts, it's not so tricky. And then you can elaborate by putting in, big stones here, sticking out more, less sticking out there, and so on. It's all about planning the whole. There's another buttress here, and I'm going to have that hidden behind the tree, so I'm not going to worry about that. What I will do is pick out this quoin, it's called, which is the corner of the building is called a quoin, French word, C-O-I-N, and that is where the stonework is more elaborate. Plus, we've also got up in the end of the building here, there is a gargoyle. Now you don't actually see it very clearly here. I might even include that on another photograph to show you how interesting that is. So, just going to, I think I've actually got that roof. Just going across it, comes up a bit higher, and I haven't got it quite high enough. And I've got the apex of that high enough. Just about, it comes up to about 2 feet there. Yes, I'm just lining everything up and double checking the height of that. Go right across, comes up halfway up the windows. So I need to come up to here. Yep, deeper roof side. Usually planned for. And possibly that gutter actually comes up a tiny bit higher, so I get the proportions right. Tidy that up. When you do a quoin, okay, so here's a simple technique. Let's do a second line coming in, lining up with some of them, not all of them. So I'm just drawing a second line here, and the third line for the ones that really come in a bit further. So I'm just going to use that. And then when I come down, I can start by doing a deep quoin here. Again, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. They're all different sizes. So we get to the long one in the middle. Let's start with the one in the middle. Number 7. And that comes into to there. And then we can go up and do the sort of deeper and thinner stones. And again, you don't have to do this exactly. That's his personal taste, but as a portrait painter, I tend to do things like a portrait where everything is got to be spot on. So we can come down for that long one now. We come in a bit more there. We go out to that line. So it's just like having guidelines, like when you're learning to write as a child. It just helps everything fall into the right place. So another big cap and deep stone, just a bit further, and another thin stone, and we're there. So we've pretty much got, and then we've got the sort of bottom part of the building coming here, comes down with the grass, comes comes down further. I'm just thinking, have I got that right? It comes down along the slope. So the grass comes down there. I've just got to raise that other part up a tiny bit there. That's the top of that. Which means I've slightly overstated my stonework. It doesn't really matter. So that's the basis of the church. Oh yes, it isn't so deep, so we just cut to there. We're now in business. We've got basis. And we see a thin edge here, and we've just got to go up into the roof where we get a little bit of stonework at the end of the cable. And we get a little statue or feature on the top of that. And orchard coming in, and some greenery coming in here, so we can just fade off. So, and we've got the church stones here in the churchyard for the gravestones. Again, these are like drawing arches at angles. This one's tilting right over. You can leave them out, but I don't mind. I quite like drawing a few stones in the church like this, and then you can draw the top of the curve and get the sort of thickness of the stone as well. It's a nice feature. It's got a little curvy bit on the edge. It's up to you how much you put it on, and then there's another cross behind that. Yeah. So we just put that into. And we've got a plan. Final thing, just is figures. Now the drawing's done, so the figures are here. We just put this lady to the left, and it's just working out what height she is